Could the New Orleans Saints make another move in this year's first round of the NFL draft? We'll talk about who they could make a move for, why it might not make sense, and take a look at some surprise first rounders that could be taken in this year's draft and whether or not the New Orleans Saints could be the team to take them. We got all that and a little bit of land yap for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, USA Today's Saints Wire, Locked On NFL on Tuesdays, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the New Orleans Saints potentially trading up. Now, as we've talked about before, I think that in my mind, the Saints have already traded up. So could they do it again? I think that it would have to be for really specific prospects and maybe only one real possibility, right? Only one real guy that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk a little bit about why trading up for the New Orleans Saints on Thursday might not make a lot of sense. And the first reason being that they kind of already did, right? They moved 18 to 16. They moved next year's first round pick to 19 this year. Or if you want to look at them as moving back from 18 to 19 in order to move up last year or next year's pick to this year at 16, either way, it's still a trade up no matter how you decide to break it down. So because they've already made this move, there's not really a lot of sense in the idea of, oh, this was half of a move, right? This is half of what the New Orleans Saints were doing because they're trying to get up into the top 5 or they're trying to get up into the top 10 when they could have used 18 and that same first rounder for next year that they traded in order to get 2 first round picks this year to just move up into the top 10 this year, possibly move into the top 5 this year as well. So it doesn't make a ton of sense, this idea that they're going to have effectively trading this year's first round pick, which was originally 18, and next year's first round pick, plus trading another first round pick, either 16 or 19, in order to get up into the top 10. That's 3 first round picks when they could have done it with 2 this year and next year. So it doesn't make a ton of sense that the Saints would be planning to move up again, right? That this was part of, the first part of a 2-part move. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. It doesn't sit well with me. So for me, I look at it as being a prospect. It would have to be because they hear that some team ahead of them is looking at a prospect that they're very interested in, that they were hoping they were going to be able to get by maximizing their selections in the first round and walking away with 2 selections in the first round at 16 and 19 like they did. So it would have to be for that one person. So if we look at players that are expected to go in the top 10 of this year's draft, you start to sort of be able to pinpoint who those players are. I don't think that the Saints, let me say it this way. I think that the Saints could be intrigued by an edge rusher if one of the top rushers were to somehow fall within range of 16, or maybe they really love Jermaine Johnson or something like that. But I don't think that they're in a situation to where they feel like they need to trade up for Kayvon Thibodeau or trade up for Aiden Hutchinson or Trevon Walker. I don't see that being a reality for the Saints. So we can take those guys off the board. So that's already 3 out of the top 10 already out of there. Again, I'm not convinced that they're looking at a quarterback this year. Nothing has really signified that for me. If they want a quarterback, they could grab one in the second round. But honestly, if they wanted one, they can grab one at 16. They can grab one at 19. They're probably not even going to wait until the second round to do it, right? Like if they want a quarterback, they'll get a quarterback at a prime position and try to get one of the top guys. But I don't think that that's going to mean them trading up. So I don't see that as really necessarily being the case. I think that Malik Willis and another quarterback will go in the top 10 probably. So that's 5 of your guys right there. And then the rest are really offensive tackles, and that's where the Saints really kind of can get involved. Evan Neal, Ike Ekwonu, and Charles Cross. Charles Cross in particular feels like the guy that could potentially be in range for them to trade up for without having to trade into the top 10. He could potentially fall out of the top 10, be available at 11 for the Commanders or available at 12 for the Minnesota Vikings, where the Saints could potentially make a trade up. Even 13 for the Houston Texans, the Saints could make a trade up there as well. Then you're talking about moving 3 or 4 spots to go and get a prospect, right? A guy that you want. that you're not necessarily convinced is going to make it past Philly at 15 or something like that, right? Or that some other team like the Chargers could potentially try to trade up to 13 to jump you, the Saints, to get Charles Cross because they want their next starting left tackle as well. So for me, that seems to be the prospect that really stands out as, oh, okay, we're in range. Let's move up and go and get them, to where I could see the Saints then actually making a second move, but not doing it with the intent of setting up for the second move, right? In that case, you're doing it because you're going after a prospect. The other prospect where that makes sense is Kyle Hamilton. If Kyle Hamilton, who is hands down the best player in this year's draft, maybe you can argue second behind Evan Neal, some people might want to argue second behind Evan Neal, but because I have Evan Neal as my second tackle, he's my second or third best, he's not my second best player across the entire draft, but Kyle Hamilton's right at the top for me. So again, Kyle Hamilton could be one of those guys at 12 or at 13, right? Now, there's been a lot of rumors about teams within the top 10 looking to trade back. Potentially the Jets being in that conversation. The Houston Texans at 3 have been interested in trading back and are apparently having a hard time doing it. So I don't think you're going to see many more trades happen before the draft. I think this is going to be kind of in the wake of the moment in terms of seeing who's available on the board. And we're going to talk about some potential surprise first round players later on in today's draft. And later on in today's episode that could go in the first round. And the reason that you have surprise first round players is because there aren't a lot of first round grades in this year's draft. I mean, we're seeing numbers like 15 or 16 first round grades per team across the NFL. Now, there's going to be some variance in between that. There's going to be some overlap in between that as well. But there's not a lot of first round grades in the first round. So that means you're going to see teams prioritize players that they feel like have traits and have the developmental opportunity to become something for them so that they can get a fifth year option on them. But outside of that, you might see some names you didn't expect to go in the first round. We'll talk about those names and whether or not any of the names that people are talking about really impact New Orleans at all, because there are a couple of players that could. But for the Saints, it just means that there's not really a reason to mobilize and get aggressive and move up again unless you're just really targeting a specific prospect. And outside of Charles Cross, I have a hard time understanding who that prospect could be unless it's Kyle Hamilton, who I just don't see falling far enough, but it could happen, right? It could happen. So for the New Orleans Saints, you've made the trade 16 and 19. I'm sticking with my guns there at 16 and 19, but let's talk a little bit about what it would look like if the Saints did trade up to go and get Charles Cross, because I was able to do it in a mock draft that I have for you here. We'll go through another 7-round mock draft. I promise you one every day this week. So we'll go through one more. And we'll take a look at what would happen if the Saints traded up to 12 for Charles Cross, I was able to do with the rest of that draft. So we'll get to that as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. But first, it's my great pleasure to be able to tell you about our friends over at Athletic Greens. Their AG1 powder, I take it every morning. I'm on the road and I have the travel packs with me, a year's supply of powder and the vitamin D drop that they also give you and everything. You'll hear more about that in a moment. But I have these travel packs as well that they gave us that I can take with me on the road. And so I've been drinking it every morning before I do anything else, before I have my coffee, before I have breakfast, any of that, because it kind of coats your stomach with all the things that you need to be able to have proper digestion, proper gut health, and help you just kind of carry out your day without having to worry about how you're going to feel and feeling sluggish and all these other things. So I think it's awesome. I think it's absolute magic. Go and check it out for yourself, though, because for a limited time, they're making it really, really easy on you. Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of that immune-supporting vitamin D that I was telling you about, and 5 of those free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit the website, athleticgreens.com/NFL network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NFL network. That way you can take ownership of your own health and get that ultimate daily nutritional insurance. And you're definitely going to want to go and check out Bet Online and all of the amazing odds, props, and lines that they have available for you, especially around the NFL draft. Malik Willis, will he go before or after pick 11, right? That's something that you can bet on. Sam Howell, is he going to go before or after pick 46 or pick 47? That's something you can bet on. You can go and take a look at all of these over-unders for a ton of different players. You can see where certain players have the odds to end up, where certain teams have the odds to draft in terms of position. They've got a bunch of stuff for you over there. So head over to the number one source that you need for all sports stats, sports info, sports developments, all the league reviews, news, everything that you're looking for, they've got you covered over at Bet Online. You can also check out the basketball playoffs and the start of the MLB season there, as well as esports and more. So head over to the website today or use your mobile device so that you can read about all of the trends and action over at Bet Online, where the game starts. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. We are just 2 days away from the first day of the NFL draft. If you haven't already, make sure you go and check out the Ultimate Mock Draft 2022. You can find it at the Ultimate NFL Mock Draft 2022 feed, as well as over in the Locked On NFL podcast feed. 6 days, all 32 first-round picks, and the first picks for all the teams that didn't draft in round one as well. Great podcast. Binge listen, super fun. Got Michael Irvin on there, got Mark Herzlich on there, Jason Lockenfor, really fun stuff. And on Thursday, we begin our live NFL draft coverage over on the Locked On NFL YouTube page. So go and subscribe today, turn on notifications so that you know when we go live. All 7 rounds are going to be covered live, and you're going to see this face over there too. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right, so we were talking about the New Orleans Saints potentially trading up again in this year's draft, in this year's first round in particular, right? Like they're going to trade up in the draft. We kind of know that, right? And so I did a mock draft for you this morning that includes us trading up as the Saints to 12 to grab Charles Cross. That was the top thing that I wanted to do, and then kind of see how to navigate the board around for the rest of this. So what I was able to do was grab Charles Cross at 12. That was an easy trade. I traded 19 because I was not about to give up 16. I wanted to hold on to 16. So I gave up 19 and I gave up I gave up 98 and 161 in order to move up to 12, and then also grab like a late 6th or 7th round pick from the Vikings in addition, which I ended up using for another trade later. So that allowed me to move up and get Charles Cross and hold on to 16, which was really important to me because I was able to walk away with what is my favorite pairing in terms of, Trevor Penning or Jameson Williams or, Treylon Burks and Trevor Penning, or Charles Cross and Garrett Wilson. My favorite pairing in terms of offensive tackle and wide receiver you could potentially leave the first round with is Charles Cross and Chris Olave. And I was able to do that at 12 and at 16. I know Chris Olave comes in under some of the thresholds. He's like 180 something pounds, but he ran a 4.39. The last time that the Saints drafted a receiver that that weighed less than 200 pounds was Brandon Cooks, who ran in the 4.3. So as long as you got something special about you, they're going to draft you, regardless of what your size is. And Chris Olave has a lot special about him, whether it's the speed or it's the fact that he's the best route runner in this year's class, whatever it might be. And the fact that he can play both inside and out. He's got the versatility, blah, 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 blah. He checks all the boxes. So Chris Olave was grateful to be able to still get him at 16. So I walked away with a win already. Like my draft was won at that point. 12, Charles Cross, 16, Chris Olave. Very happy about it. Then at pick 49, which I held on to, didn't move up in the second round. Wanted to see what safety would fall there. I walked away with Nick Cross, who has some good range. He's a developmental free safety, along with Kirby Joseph. He's probably the best sort of single high safety that's going to be in this year's draft. He's a little bit developmental. You have to work with him a bit, but he's somebody that could potentially fit directly into what it is that they're doing, and I love that the Saints are doing. And I love the fact that he comes from Maryland because the Saints secondary assistant, Corey Robinson, also used to coach at Maryland. So he already knows the language. He knows how to translate that system in Maryland, that defensive system that they play. He knows how to help them translate that to the principles, the theology, the philosophy of the Dennis Allen New Orleans Saints defense. So Nick Cross, I thought, was a pretty natural fit for New Orleans there. Then I made a little trade up here, traded a couple of late round picks to move back into the top 100. Since I gave up 99 in the earlier trade, I used that Vikings pick as well as the last remaining pick that I had, or one of the last remaining picks that I had from this season to move up. And that allowed me to go up and get Rachaad White, the running back out of Arizona State. Alvin Kamara's court date got postponed again. Now it's going to be in August. It was supposed to be yesterday. And then defense needed more time to review the tape and all these other things. Review the tape. Listen to me. To review the evidence and everything. And so now that's being pushed back to August. I really don't even care how that situation pans out. I think no matter what, Alvin Kamara is going to probably end up with a suspension because remember, the court of the law and the court of the NFL are different. You don't have to be thrown in jail in order to be suspended by the NFL. He could be released of everything, but then if the NFL looks at the tape and says, yeah, that's AK, he punched that dude, all right, he's suspended, that's a code of conduct violation, then they can do that. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter what actually happens in the court of the law. So with that, I think that the Saints should prepare to be without Alvin Kamara at the beginning of the season, just in case. And honestly, even if he is going to be there, you tried so hard over the course of the past couple of years to turn Ty Montgomery into the sort of copy and paste version of Alvin Kamara. Not like insultingly, but like you didn't want to have to change the playbook when AK wasn't on the field. It makes perfect sense. With Rachaad White, you can do that exact same thing. He can run routes for you. He can run routes out of the backfield. He's a good pass blocker. He's a good runner between the tackles and on the outside. He doesn't have a lot of wear and tear. He fits all of your thresholds. He's, really explosive. He's strong. Does it all. So Rachaad White, I was able to trade up for him and get him at 99. And then I traded a future 5th as well as the last remaining pick that I had for this season to get back up into 134 here. I wanted to boost myself back up with the last selection that I'll make for this mock draft, which was interior defensive line out of Tennessee, Matthew Butler. I had 2 options there, Matthew Butler, and I also had Matt Henningsen, the defensive tackle from Wisconsin, who is just wild explosive. I mean, the guy's 6'3", 289 pounds, so he can bulk up a little bit, but a 37.5-inch vertical jump, a 9'11" broad jump. That's better than some DBs in this year's draft. And the guy was 289 pounds playing 3-tech. You know what I mean? So Matthew Butler is somebody that can play a little bit more kind of versatile all around the line, has a little bit of better like instincts, which I think is the only thing that holds Matt Henningsen back. So Matt Henningsen out of Wisconsin, somebody I could have selected, but because Matthew Butler was here, it was just an easy selection for me. But I did want to highlight Matt Henningsen because he's one of my sleepers. You want to hear a little bit more about him by any chance, go and check out Locked On NFL today. Luke and I broke down our sleepers. Matt Henningsen was absolutely one of them. But Matthew Butler, the interior defensive lineman out of Tennessee, the Saints love their Tennessee Volunteer prospects. He would be another one that would fit right in. And he's somebody that has already shown, that we've already seen, can translate from that Tennessee defense to the New Orleans Saints defense and working with Ryan Nielsen. We've seen it with Shai Tuttle. We've seen it with Taylor Stallworth. Now we would have the opportunity to see it with Matthew Butler at 134, right? So if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I wanted to make sure I walked away with some interior defensive linemen. So what are the positions that I didn't address that I could have maybe addressed in this draft? Tight end is definitely one of them. But honestly, I'm really curious to see how the Saints are going to handle tight end this year because Taysom is going to be playing a little bit more of that F move tight end. Are you feeling good about Nick Van Ette's health? And then are you feeling good about Adam Trautman as a good run blocker, right? Serving the role as a true Y, which is what he was drafted to do. And then we hyped him up a little bit too much his second year. So I think that with all of that, how much more are you really looking to add to that tight end room? I think you can add a starter there, but as a rookie, you're not coming in and making an impact at the tight end position. No rookie ever does. And so if you've got Juwan Johnson, who actually played pretty well in his first year after transitioning to tight end, you get him into his second year, utilize him more, please. Love to see him out on the field more. And then you have Taysom Hill, who's focusing in a pass catcher role. Nick Van Ette's healthy. Adam Trautman has a new role. You know what I mean? You're not trying to use him as a pass catcher as much, using him as a blocker instead, a true Y. I think you're kind of okay in that situation. I didn't address cornerback, but cornerback is one of those sneaky positions that I keep seeing and hearing hints about, right? That the Saints could potentially go corner. They love Paulson and Debo, but it's a position you could always get better at. It's a premier position, all of that. So you might as well load up at it. So just a position to watch. Maybe it's not a first round situation. That wouldn't make a ton of sense. But, in the later rounds, if you're just trying to get maybe the next PJ Williams in line, right? Another versatile guy that you can move around the secondary. That would make sense. I would definitely see that. And then, of course, the only other position that I think a lot of people think that the Saints might address that I didn't address was quarterback. You all know why. Okay, coming up next, we're going to take a look at some of the surprise late first round picks. Tom Pelissero put together a great list of those guys. Let's talk about whether or not the New Orleans Saints could surprise by taking them in the middle of the round. We got that coming up for you as we continue on to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. But first, of course, I want to tell you about Rock Auto, our friends over at rockauto.com, who take care of tons of families online. They've been doing it for over 20 years online, making sure that you're able to go get the auto parts, pieces, accessories, whatever it is that you're looking for. Maybe it's something you need for your car. Maybe it's just something that you want for your car, a little upgrade or something like that. Rock Auto has you taken care of. The website's super easy to navigate, super lightweight, very little loading time. You jump in there, you click, your make, your model, the year, then you hit the part or piece that you're looking for, or the, where the location of it is. They just make it so that it's the internet equivalent of walking up to somebody and saying, yeah, I don't know, when I turn my car on, it goes instead of going right. It's just they make everything so simple. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else but me, but it helps me a ton. So go and check out rockauto.com. They've got everything that you need. And of course, you're going to save a lot of money going there as opposed to going to the brick and mortar chain stores as well. So head over to rockauto.com today. Grab what you need on your way out as you're going through checkout. Make sure you let them know that Locked On sent you. Right and Locked On in the How'd You Hear About Us section. Amazing selection, reliable low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a quick look at it. I thought this was a fun topic here around 7 potential surprise first-round selections in this year's NFL draft and whether or not any of them actually could make sense for the New Orleans Saints. Could the New Orleans Saints surprise and be one of the teams that goes back and grabs one of these, first-round selections that's maybe not necessarily a first-round grade? And the reason why this has come up is because this draft is sort of now becoming infamous for not having a ton of first-round selections, right? A ton of first-round grades. This could be actually a pretty barren first round, right? Think back to like 2013 draft. That was like the first round was like a ghost town. So when you look at this year's draft, apparently there are a lot of concerns around that. And certainly you can see that, right? I mean, you have your premier top guys. And then after that, it's kind of a bunch of people, right? That could be second round selections, it could be third round selections. And especially when you don't have the quarterback sitting at the top of this class like you usually do, that kind of muddies the waters a bit as well. So you're going to see teams draft quarterbacks because they're quarterback hungry, not draft quarterbacks because they are the next best quarterback to come out of the NFL or to come into the NFL. So who are some of these? So Tom Pelissero over at NFL.com put together this list of 7 players that could potentially surprise by going in the first round. The first player on this list is Lewis Cine, the safety out of Georgia. 4'3", 40-yard dash, 36.5-inch vertical jump, 11'1" broad jump as well. Very physical, very explosive, can kind of do a lot of things as well. By the way, he checked in all those numbers at 6'2", 199 pounds. So great size for a safety as well. So he'll be one to really watch. And I think that he could be a player, honestly, that the Saints could invest in. If the board falls kind of like what we talked about last week, to where, or in Monday's episode, sort of the worst case scenario, all 4 top 4 tackles and all 4 top 4 wide receivers are off the board by the time you get to 16. You're taking the next best wide receiver, and then maybe you take Lewis Cine at 16 as opposed to Devontae Wyatt like I did. So I wouldn't be shocked by that one at all if the Saints were to be that team. Logan Hall, the defensive tackle out of Houston. I hate to say it, y'all, but remember this name. Just remember this name. He's unique. 6'6", 283 pounds, 4'8", 40 with a 4.44 20-yard shuttle to 7.25 cone. Those are great. Those are great numbers. Y'all know what I almost said. Those are great numbers. Pass rush ability. He's got 6.5 sacks on the season last year. Could be a 5 tech. Could go into a couple of other spots as well. So just read some of the notes from Tom Pelissero there. But you want to know your kind of like small school interior defensive lineman or defensive lineman as a whole to keep an eye out on, because the Saints tend to surprise with those kind of picks. Logan Hall, defensive tackle out of Houston, former teammate of Peyton Turner, who was this guy last year, could be this guy. Now, if the Saints were picking more towards like 27, 28, I'd be a little bit more like, yeah, this could potentially happen. I think at 16 and 19, you're going to have better options than this, but Logan Hall, just remember the name. Travis Jones, defensive tackle out of Connecticut. We've talked a bunch about him. We've mocked him in the second round a bunch here on the show. Yeah, he could potentially creep up into the bottom of the first round. That absolutely makes sense. 6'4", 325 pounds, 4.92 speed. I mean, it's pretty good. He's a really, really good athletic defensive tackle, but also is just really good against the run. David Ojabo, who was originally going to be one of those guys that might potentially challenge for one of the top edge rusher spots. He had that injury. I want to make sure I call it the right injury. It was an Achilles injury that he suffered during the pro day on March 18th. So he's probably not playing in 2022. So people kind of like dropped him off their boards, or at least dropped him into the second or third rounds. Because, I mean, if you get the guy back, and we've seen the way that Achilles injuries heal now, you get the guy and then you get him back and then he's 90% of what he was in college. And all of a sudden, you've drafted a first rounder in the third round or in the second round. But he could be one of those guys that you potentially grab in the back end of the first round, because you might want that 5th year option, right? An extra healthy year of him on a rookie scale deal. that definitely works. I don't think, though, that the Saints go this route. They're looking for immediate impact players that are going to be able to get out on the field this year. George Pickens, wide receiver out of Georgia. Yep, and yep. 6'3", 195 pounds, 4.47 speed. He's an X, right? He's a quintessential X receiver. So maybe the redundancy with Michael Thomas won't work, but hey, everybody loves to talk about how Michael Thomas works in the inside, so you shouldn't draft inside guys. So then why the hesitation about drafting outside guys that could play his role in a split end situation? If you're going to use them on the inside, make up your mind. So I think George Pickens could absolutely be somebody that the Saints at least have an eye out on. I think they want more of a speedier deep threat, but honestly, like, he could do that too. It's just that we look at his measurables at 6'3", 195 pounds, and we say, oh, he's an X. But honestly, like, let George Pickens go out there and do whatever he wants, because he's also fierce. I mean, he's a fantastic pass blocker. Like, having George Pickens on the offensive side would be like having a CJ Gardner-Johnson on offense. So that excites me. I know that excites you too. Nicholas Petit-Frere, the Ohio State offensive tackle. Yeah, absolutely. All these offensive tackles that have the ability, like these top 4 offensive tackles in this draft could potentially come off the board in the top 10, according to Tom Pelissero here. So guys like Nicholas Petit-Frere, some of these other like lower, second tier offensive tackles like Bernard Raymond, they could potentially easily go in the first round. And he's an Ohio State Buckeye, so sure, keep an eye out for him for the New Orleans Saints. And then finally, Quay Walker, the linebacker out of Georgia. I like Quay Walker. He's a really, really good athlete. 6'3", 240 pounds. He's kind of my build in terms of the linebackers that I really like. 4.52 speed. So he's rangy. A couple of quarterback pressures, or quite a few quarterback pressures. He gets a lot of tackles, and when he gets his hands on you, you're going down. Like, he brings you down. Doesn't miss a lot of tackles, all that. So he's great. I think he's an instinctive player. He's really good. But I think that the thing about it is that I don't look at the New Orleans Saints as going to linebacker here with 2 first-round picks. I can't see that one. So I don't think that they would be involved in that one. So just to recap, Nicholas Petit-Frere, George Pickens, Logan Hall, and Lewis Cine, names to watch in the first round if the New Orleans Saints decide to do something sneaky and surprising, which we know they have a capacity to do in the first round of the NFL draft. We'll continue tomorrow to break down more. We'll call it our Wacky Wednesday. We're going to jump into Pro Football Focus's mock draft simulator, turn the randomness all the way up, and see what happens, because there's no use always trying to predict an unpredictable NFL draft with some predictable mock draft simulators. So let's make the mock draft simulators unpredictable as well and see what happens and how we would respond. We're going to have a ton of fun with that on tomorrow's episode. I appreciate y'all as always for making me your first listen of the day every day here on Locked On Saints. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out Locked On NFL Draft. Just did a recent mock draft, and they're getting you ready for everything you need to know with the first round coming up on Thursday. We're almost there. I'm so happy. So I appreciate y'all as always making me a part of your routine. For everything else you need in between these episodes on your New Orleans Saints, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.